Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. In the barren wasteland where the sun barely broke through the ashing clouds, Rex moved like a ghost among the ruins. His body, a strange marriage of flesh and metal, was more efficient than any human, but he still felt a familiar burn in his legs as he trudged through the decaying industrial zone. His eyes, sharp and augmented with night vision, scanned the area. Rex had been in countless battles, but today was different. Today he was searching for the Heart of Steel Saya, the legendary artifact that promised freedom, true freedom for those like him, torn between human and machine. A gust of wind kicked up dust from the cracked earth. The remnants of old factories loomed over him, broken glass and rusted metal framing the ruins like a graveyard of a forgotten age. Rex had heard the stories since the moment he woke up as something more than a man's stories, whispered among scavengers and rebels. Some said the heart could grant free will to cyborgs. Others believed it was a myth. But Rex couldn't afford to think that way. He needed it. Without it, he was just a puppet, a tool, and nothing more. A low hum vibrated in the back of his skull. His enhanced hearing picked up faint sounds, footsteps, faint but deliberate. Raiders. They always came in small groups, armed with whatever scraps they could scavenge, blasters, knives, sometimes even old-fashioned clubs. Rex crouched behind the remnants of a rusted-out transport vehicle, his mechanical arm tensing in anticipation. The metal plates beneath his synthetic skin flexed, ready for combat. He didn't want this. Every time he was forced to fight, he felt a part of his humanity slip away, swallowed by the cold efficiency of his cybernetic implant. The raiders closed in, their low growls and whispers, giving away their location. 3 of them by the sound of their steps. 1 heavyset carrying a blaster, 2 light moving Enchanting, likely armed with blade. Rex calculated the odds, his mechanical brain running simulations in the background. His human side clenched with guilt. It always happened too fast, the fight, the kill. The way his body operated without hesitation when his human mind screamed for mercy. The first raider appeared from behind a crumbled wall, aiming his blaster at Rex. But before the man could even squeeze the trigger, Rex had already moved. He lunged forward, a blur of motion, and snapped the blaster from the raider's hands with his mechanical arm, crushing it effortlessly. The second raider, a wiry man with knives strapped to his wrists, came at him next. Rex caught one blade mid-swing, the sharp edge glinting as it met the unyielding alloy of his hand. With a flick of his wrist, Rex disarmed him, sending the knife clattering to the ground. The third raider, a woman, hesitated. She saw what Rex had done to her companions, but she wasn't ready to back down. "I don't want to hurt you," Rex said, his voice rough from disuse. The woman sneered, brandishing her blade. You don't have a choice, Tin Man." In an instant, she charged. Rex sidestepped her easily, his enhanced reflexes taking over. His hand caught her wrist and twisted. She screamed, dropping the knife. Rex let her go, pushing her back. The woman scrambled to her feet, breathing heavily. "What the hell are you?" she spat. "A man," Rex replied, though he wasn't sure if he believed it himself. The raiders gathered their fallen weapons and retreated. Rex watched them disappear into the dust, and for a moment, he stood there, letting the silence of the wasteland wash over him. He flexed his mechanical fingers, feeling the weight of his action. The fight was over in seconds, but it was another reminder of what he had become, something more than human, something far more dangerous. As the wind picked up again, Rex started walking, his thoughts a chaotic mess of memories and fragments. The heart of steel, only thing that could change him, that could restore the balance between the man and the machine. But did he deserve it? He wasn't truly sure. The path ahead was treacherous. The forbidden zone lay miles to the west, where the Heart of Steel Tower was said to be hidden. But Rex knew he wasn't the only one looking for it. Others far more dangerous than scavengers were after it too. By nightfall, Rex found a place to rest in the hollowed-out husk of an old factory. He sat against the wall, the cold metal pressing into his back. His human side ached, exhausted from the day's events, but his mechanical side hummed with restless energy, never fully at ease. As he closed his eyes, memories came to him in pieces like shattered glass. He remembered the day he lost his humanity, the day he became more machine than man. It was a time of war, of chaos. He had been captured by the overlords, a faction of fully mechanized beings who believed that free will was a weakness, something to be eradicated. They had torn him apart and rebuilt him into their image, erasing most of what made him human. But not all. Deep inside, Rex still held onto fragments of his old self, fragments of a life he could barely remember. A sound pulled him from his thoughts, footsteps again, but these were softer, lighter. Not raiders this time. He opened his eyes and saw a figure approaching, a woman draped in a hooded cloak. She moved with the grace of someone who knew the wasteland well, her hand resting on the hilt of a makeshift weapon strapped to her side. "Don't bother trying to sneak up on me," Rex said, not bothering to move from his resting place. His sensors had picked her up long before she reached him. The woman stopped a few paces away and lowered her hood. She was young, with sharp features and eyes that gleamed with intelligence. Her dark hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, and despite the harsh environment, she carried herself with confidence. "Name's Lyra," she said, her voice steady. "Heard you were looking for this heart of steel." Rex raised an eyebrow. "And who told you that?" "I hear things," Lyra replied with a smirk, the wasteland so full of whispers. "You were not exactly subtle." Rex stood towering over her and wet on the tea. Lyra shrugged. "I've got my reasons. Maybe I help you find it. Maybe we both get what we want." Rex studied her for a moment. He had learned long ago to trust no one in the wasteland. Everyone had their own agenda, and alliances were fragile at best. But something about Lyra intrigued him. She wasn't just another scavenger or raider. She had a purpose, and that made her dangerous. "What's your angle?" Rex asked. "The heart," Lyra said simply. "I know where it is, or at least I know where to start looking, but I need someone like you to get me there." Rex narrowed his eyes. "And what makes you think I want tea? Just leave you behind the moment I get what I want." Lyra chuckled. "You won tea because I am the only one who can guide you through the forbidden zone. Without me, you'll be dead before you even get close." Rex considered her words carefully. He didn't like the idea of relying on anyone, but Lyra had a point. The Forbidden Zone was a place of legend, a region filled with traps, old war machines, and worse. If she could get him there, it was worth the risk. "All right," Rex said finally. "We'll work together, but the moment you try to cross me—" "I know," Lyra interrupted with a grin. "You'll kill me. I get it now. Let's get moving." Rex wasn't sure if he could trust her, but at this point, he had no other choice. Together, they set off toward the Forbidden Zone, the air growing colder as the sun dipped below the horizon. Nightfall in the wasteland brought its own dangers, but Rex's mind was focused on the task ahead. The heart of steel was out there waiting for him, and with it, the answers he had been seeking for so long. But as they moved deeper into the ruins, Rex couldn't shake the feeling that something else was watching them, something far more dangerous than the raiders or even the overlord. The wasteland was alive in ways most people couldn't try to understand, and Rex knew that whatever awaited him at the end of this journey, it would be more than just a battle of flesh and metal. It would be a battle for his soul. Rex and Lingerie moved swiftly through the night, their path lit only by the faint glow of distant, crumbling city structure. The horizon flickered with strange lights from malfunctioning war machines, remnants of an ancient conflict that still stirred in the darkness. Lyra kept pace beside him, her presence a reminder that he wasn't doing this alone, though he could still feel the mistrust hanging between them like a loaded gun. They traveled in silence for a while, the only sound the crunch of their boots on the dry earth. Rex sensors picked up movement in the distance, but it was nothing more than wildlife, if it could even be called that in this barren place. Creatures out here had adapted to the wasteland much like its human inhabitants. The weak died, and only those ruthless enough to endure survived. Lyra eventually broke the silence, her voice low, but carrying a casual confidence. "You ever been to the Forbidden Zone before?" "No," Rex replied, keeping his eyes forward, "but I've heard enough stories."
They don't do it justice.
Lyra said it's not just the traps or the old war machines that will get you. There are other things that don't even make sense. Rex glanced at her. "What kind of thing?" Lyra's mouth tightened into a thin line. "You'll see." They pressed on, and Rex's mind began to wander. It had been years, decades, maybe since he had first heard of the heart of steel. He had been little more than a pawn back then, a fresh product of the overlord's experiments, barely understanding what had been done to him. But over time he discovered what had been taken from him, and he became determined to get it back. The heart was the only lead he had, the only chance to break free from the prison of his own body. Lyra's presence kept him anchored to the present, though. She moved with purpose, leading him through the maze of crumbling streets and broken highways with the ease of someone who had lived in the wasteland her entire life. Rex had seen survivors before scavengers, drifters, soldiers, but Litra was different. She wasn't just surviving, she was thriving, and that made her dangerous in a way he couldn't. By the time dawn began to break, the twisted landscape had shifted. The ground beneath them turned from cracked dirt and rubble to something far older, smooth, metallic surfaces that shimmered faintly in the growing light. They had reached the outskirts of the forbidden zone. The air felt heavier here, thick with an unseen tension. Rex's sensors picked up strange signals, faint, almost undetectable, but they were there, whispering on the edges of his perception. "We were close," Lyra said, stopping beside an ancient rusted structure. "But this is where things get tricky." Rex surveyed the area. It was quiet, too quiet. No scavengers, no raiders, not even the usual wildlife, just silent. "Traps?" asks Ash. "More than that," Lyra replied, pulling a small device from her pack. "This place has defenses, the kind that don't take care if you're a human or a machine." She fiddled with the device, adjusting a few settings before a soft, low hum filled the air. Rex's sensors reacted immediately, picking up pulses of energy in the area around them, defense systems buried deep beneath the ground. His mechanical side began processing the data, mapping out the location of the traps and calculating the safest route forward. "You go first," Lyra said with a grin. "You were the one with the metal part." Rex shot her a look, but didn't he argue? His body was more resilient than hers, at least when it came to physical damage. He stepped forward, his sensors guiding him through the field of invisible trap. Each step was careful, deliberate, as he avoided the energy pulses that could fry his circuits or worse. Lyra followed closely, trusting him to clear the path. They moved in tandem, weaving between the deadly traps with a precision that bordered on instinct. The landscape shifted around them, growing more surreal with each passing moment. Strange metallic structures jutted from the ground at odd angles, and the air seemed to hum with a life of its own. Rex could feel it in his bones. The forbidden zone wasn't just a place. It was alive. After what felt like hours, they reached the heart of the zone. Before them stood an ancient structure, half buried in the ground, but unmistakably significant. It was unlike anything Rex had seen before, a massive domed building, its surface covered in strange glowing symbols that pulsed with an otherworldly energy. "The heart's end there," Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. Rex stepped forward, but before he could reach the entrance, a booming voice echoed through the air. "Stop." Rex's sensors flared, and he spun around just in time to see a figure emerge from the shadow. It was massive, fully mechanized, a towering being of metal and circuitry, the Overlord. "You read too late," the Overlord said, its voice cold and mechanical. "The heart of steel belongs to us." Rex's muscles tensed and his mind raced. He had known the Overlords would be coming for the heart, but he hadn't expected them to be here already. Lyra stepped back, her hand reaching for her weapon, but Rex knew that wouldn't do them any good. The Overlord was far beyond anything they could fight head-on. "You can have it," Rex said, his voice steady despite the tension in the air. "The heart of steel isn't for you." The Overlord's glowing red eyes locked onto him. "You think you can stop me, you who are more machine than man? You should join us. Rex, your humanity is a weakness." Rex's jaw clenched. He'd heard those words before, back when the Overlords had first taken him, back when they had stripped him of his humanity and tried to turn him into one of them. But Rex had fought back then, and he would fight again now. "I am not like you," Rex said, stepping forward. "I'll never be like you." The Overlord's eyes flickered with something resembling amusement. "We'll see." With a sudden deafening roar, the Overlord lunged forward, its massive form charging toward Rex. Rex reacted instinctively, his mechanical side kicking into overdrive. He dodged to the left, narrowly avoiding the Overlord's searching blow. The ground shook beneath him as the Overlord's fist slammed into the earth, leaving a crater in its wake. Lyra fired a shot at the Overlord, stole back, but the bullet ricocheted harmlessly off its armor. The Overlord turned its attention toward her, raising a massive arm to strike. "No," Rex shouted, rushing forward. He slammed into the Overlord with all his strength, driving it back before it could reach Lyra. The impact sent a shockwave through Rex's body, his mechanical limbs straining under the force. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Not now. The Overlord recovered quickly, turning its full attention back to Rex. "You cannot win. Rex, you are one of us. Embrace it." "I am nothing like you," Rex growled, his human side pushing back against the cold logic of his machine brain. He could feel the conflict rage inside him, his body telling him to fight, to kill, while his mind screamed for another way. The Overlord lunged again, but this time Rex was ready. He dodged, weaving around the massive machine with a speed that surprised even him. His human mind and mechanical body worked together, finally in sync for the first time in years. The battle raged on, each blow from the Overlord threatening to overwhelm Rex, but he fought back with everything he had, using his speed and agility to outmaneuver the hulking machine. Leo, too, did what she could, distracting the Overlord just enough to give Rex the opening he needed. In a final desperate move, Rex leaped onto the Overlord and's back, driving his mechanical arm into the exposed circuitry at its neck. Sparks flew, and the Overlord roared in fury, thrashing wildly. But Rex held on, using every ounce of his strength to pull the wires free. The Overlord collapsed with a thunderous crash, its massive form going limp. Rex rolled off its back, breathing heavily, his human side aching with exhaustion, while his mechanical side hummed with the aftermath of the battle. Lyra approached cautiously, her eyes wide with a mix of awe and fear. You actually did it. Rex stood, his body trembling from the effort. It's not over yet. He turned toward the ancient structure, the cart of steel tar, just beyond its door. But as he approached, something shifted inside him, a realization, quiet but profound. The heart wasn't going to save him. It never had the power to give him freedom, because freedom was never something that could be granted by a machine. It was something he had to choose. Rex stopped in front of the massive doors, his reflection distorted in the glowing symbol. His mechanical arm, his human face, they were both part of him. He wasn't just a man or just a machine. He was both. And that was enough. He turned to Lyra, who watched him with a mix of confusion and curiosity, reweaving. Lyra blinked. What about the heart? Rex smiled, a small, genuine smile. I don't need it. The journey had ended, but the war inside him had been won.